With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
A very, very good afternoon if you're in Australia, evening if you're in the, or early evening, late afternoon if you're heading off home in New South Wales. It's 8 after 5 there, 8 after 4 in Queensland, 100 years behind, never mind. In Hawaii, by the way, it's I think it's 8 after 8 in the evening. We'll find out shortly on how correct I am, if my research has been worth it. And a warm aloha too to our next guest. And also in the UK, it's that alarm, which is very alarming. It's 8 after 6. And all I can say is you have to get up now. All right, stop abusing the clock. It can't hear you. You have to get up and have a great day too. Hopefully you'll see some photos of the sun, because that's all you'll see of the sun for the day in the UK. Now, the UK is under fire for trying to surrender Chagos Islands to Mauritius for billions and to lease back US base Diego Garcia. President Trump called it an act of great stupidity. Nigel Farage has called it possibly the worst deal by a British government in history. Others say the Chagos Islands is just a surrender scandal, the epitome of his government, signified by lies, confusion, and reckless disdain for public money. The Starmer is relentlessly pursuing a policy that materially damages the UK and benefits those who would harm Britain's interest. Now, the deal may now not go through if vetoed by the US administration. Colonel Grant Newsham is the author of the recent book, When China Attacks, A Warning to America. He's also a retired US Marine officer with decades of experience in the Indo-Pacific, to include serving as reserve head of intelligence for Marine Forces Pacific. He was the first Marine advisor to the Japan Self-Defense Force and helped create Japan's amphibious force. Mr. Newsham is also an attorney with experience in international trade and interactional law, which I have no idea what that means. I should find out. Grant, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks very much. Glad to be here.
What is, by the way, what is interactional law?
In some places, it's called international law.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, which just means law involving foreigners, but or that sort of law between nations that you sometimes hear about. So there's two meanings, but I've usually heard it called international law.
Yeah, we'll stick to that one next time. Thank you. By the way, was I right with the time in Hawaii?
We're 200 years back, but otherwise you're correct. Yes.
Yeah, isn't it funny? When I lived there, I mean, off track here, but anyway, I can do what I like just about until I finish, and then I'm beheaded. When I lived there, there was a great push to give Hawaii back to Hawaii and not secede, but just move away from the US. It never happened. And the US, I never noticed the government there was really excited to do it at one stage. And we know how and the locals are brilliant people, but they say, we'll do it tomorrow. Hey, bruh, what's up? We'll do it tomorrow. Anyway, and that's what happened. It just, I don't think much happened, but I think it's a magnificent part of the world and very important strategically too for the US. People think it's one of the safest places on the planet. It probably is one of the safest places on the planet, but it's also going to be a point of interest if there was a stoush between two major powers. Chagos, it was a disastrous decision by Starmer. What's your make of it and take on it?
It is a disaster. It kind of makes you wonder if the United Kingdom, or at least the people running it, the people who elect them, are actually our friends. Those islands, and particularly that base at Diego Garcia, if you think about it, it's the equivalent in the Indian Ocean of what our bases in Hawaii are for the U.S. military. Without the Hawaiian bases, we could not defend the Pacific or Asia. Same thing goes with Diego Garcia. It's the only thing we have down there. The idea of giving this to Mauritius for no reason other than an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice, to which Britain is not under jurisdiction, is crazy. Plus, a couple things there. One, Mauritius is very close to China. The Chinese will make even shorter work of it and subvert the entire place. And once Mauritius has Diego Garcia, it really doesn't matter if you have a so-called treaty. You just break it. Plus, Britain misses one payment over 99 years, and Mauritius can terminate the deal. At some point, the British aren't going to want to keep paying to have given something back. And the small matter is that the original inhabitants of Chagos have nothing to do with Mauritius. So Britain is turning them over to another colonial master. And the Chagosians don't want any part of it. They want to stay with the British. But ultimately, this is an act of betrayal. And it's really inexplicable, I think, particularly given the opposition which has arisen recently, just as people actually started to look into this, into the deal, and say, hey, this is bad. That given the way the Starmer et al. Are trying to bullet through, this is more than just fear of embarrassment or some sort of belief in that gets Britain away from the colonial boogeyman. I think there's more going on. And you ask who benefits from this, and I think it's Beijing. And you'd have to ask yourself, well, it looks like the Starmer administration is doing Beijing's bidding for some reason. And I don't know exactly why. I don't really have evidence other than circumstantial. But the way that he rolled over, say, for the embassy deal in London, in the spite of just fierce opposition to this, locally and otherwise, suggests that something's kind of odd. The way that the cases were withdrawn for those parliamentary officials who were spying for China, that's strange. The way he went to China and basically kowtowed and was otherwise humiliated and seemed to enjoy it. Something strange is going on. It's not in America's interest, Britain's interests, or the free world's interests.
Now, put me straight here. Media is saying that also the US had approved it. Now, if they had approved it, how did this come about? And was it? I was shocked that I would ever think that another government would be deceptive, but was there deception at play?
I think it probably was some deception. Sort of like, say, a real estate agent trying to sell a house. They know it's got problems, but they just want to get the deal through. And they didn't explain clearly these are risks that are there to be seen and are pretty obvious. You might say the Trump administration didn't have its feet on the ground yet. It had just taken office, and somehow I think they got bamboozled. Regardless, it was pretty stupid of them to say what they did. And it otherwise is inexplicable. But I think it was sort of pushed through in a sort of yes minister kind of way. And I think the Americans didn't quite know what the problems were. The idea was, well, we're the British, trust us, just like the people of Hong Kong learned that lesson, or the people of Zimbabwe, who were pretty much assured, don't worry about Mugabe, we've got him under control. You think they'd have known better.
How can they stop the deal? Can the US do it by veto? Is there a treaty involved?
Well, there's a treaty from 1966. It's the original treaty between the US and Britain regarding the use of Diego Garcia. And you can use that if you want to bring the case to terminate it. But just as a political matter, when your best ally, the United States, says, we don't want to do this, you ought to listen. And say the fact that they're still trying to push it through, even though they know how just bad a deal it is, and that it can legally be terminated pretty easily by the either lawfully or just as a practical matter by the government of Mauritius acting on behalf of China, that Britain should say, well, you're that unhappy? Okay, we're going to listen to you. But I said, when you keep trying to get it through, knowing that it's going to cause lots of problems, you've got to ask who benefits. And there's of course, I forgot I used to do organized crime matters for a living, and there's could be some just plain old corruption here. Britain's going to pay at least 3 billion, probably a lot more, to Mauritius. Well, the chief negotiator for Mauritius is a friend of Keir Starmer. You can figure that out. When there's that much money around, there's always somebody who's taking a cut of it.
Do you have a gut feeling on what the real reason for this Chagos deal is? We notice Starmer or the UK is really selling itself out to China. It is, along with Australia and Canada. Whether this is the Trump derangement syndrome that the prime ministers of various Commonwealth countries are experiencing, who knows? But it's going to create all sorts of headaches for the West. What do you feel? What do you think in your gut the real reason why the Chagos deal happened? Maybe some say he wanted just to make a point to the rest of the world, in particular the US. What's your feelings?
I think ultimately, and just a feeling that the slice of the British ruling class or political class that brought this about and pushed it, I think, is incredibly woke. And the idea of ending colonialism is something that they feel good about. But more than that, I think this is a deliberate effort done out of resentment of the United States, an attempt to ruin America's strategic positioning. And I think that's what you see here. This is not normal. I think this is a deliberate attempt to sort of hurt the United States, and you throw in a little bit of Trump derangement syndrome, but I don't even think that's necessary. I think it is a deliberate attempt to bring America down. And a fellow like, for example, Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, he just comes across as a sort of a nice version of Klaus Schwab, the former head of World Economic Forum. I don't wish to be insulting, but you listen to what he says, and these are people who I think don't have much love for the United States and the role it plays or the freedoms that it represents ultimately.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Klaus Barbie for a minute. I thought instead of Schwab.
Yeah.
But that would be the discussion over a whiskey or two. What's China's relationship with Mauritius?
They have huge investments and commercial interests, and there's a usual approach is you start with commerce, economic presence, a physical presence, and then you start creating a constituency that's pro-China, and it's all greased by bribes, under the table payments. And I think it's fair to say they are pretty close to having the place. The Indians kind of thought it was their patch, but the Chinese, like everywhere they go, it is a predictable pattern. Economics, commerce, physical presence, bribery, and building up that constituency to effectively have a proxy government and proxies throughout the ruling class and below. And it's an influence game, and they do it very well. And they are pretty close to having the place. And you know exactly what's going to happen. That's one thing about the Chinese and how they operate, is it's not hard to figure out. You can actually see and predict what's going to happen. But they certainly have an interest in the Americans getting pushed out of Diego Garcia. And once you do that, the Americans find it very hard to operate in the region. And that includes over to Africa, up into South Asia, up into Iran, to the east side of the Indian Ocean. Very difficult. And I'd also mention with the Chagos that Mauritius has signed it's the Palindaba Treaty, which is about 50-some African countries have agreed that there will be no nuclear weapons on their territories. Well, the Americans often or sometimes have nukes in Diego Garcia. So as soon as this treaty goes through, America is in violation of the treaty. And the Mauritians have actually said, we're going to push this issue. So you're just setting yourself up for a miserable time. And there's, once again, who benefits from this? Well, the boys in Beijing are the ones who'd be happiest about it.
Do you think maybe they should send a short video on Venezuela to the authorities just to remind them what happens to bad leaders. What about the UK relationship with China? It really has been very cosy of late, hasn't it?
It is, you and I cited several examples, but if you watched just the footage of uh, Prime Minister Starmer's visit to Beijing, oh my goodness, this was worse than anyone imagined. He looked like a naughty schoolboy being led off to detention, and that was after getting the red carpet treatment that he got. He did not come across well. The Chinese purposely humiliated him, showing him around Tiananmen Square, the Forbidden City, with like a low-level tour guide. This was bad. He came out of it, but it was a great success in one respect because for all that kowtowing, the Chinese reduced the tariff on whiskey from 10% to 5%. So that was quite an achievement. Uh, and then, as I mentioned, the embassy deal, dropping the espionage cases against that, and allowing the subversion of not subversion, the harassment of the Chinese diaspora, of Hong Kong people, allowing this to go on nonstop in England. That really is something that's pretty strange. And if you're my age, you grew up with, Britain was the ones who won the Battle of Britain, who took on the Germans for a couple of years by themselves and really saved Western civilization. So this seems like a completely different species of people looking at how they have really just knuckled under to a pretty nasty regime. Starmer goes to China, and Jimmy Lee's still in prison. The Uyghurs are still in concentration camps. Organs are still being harvested, but he comes back and says the relationship's never been stronger. They say this is a different Britain, and in fairness, one noted that during the David Cameron era, that they were pretty pro-China as well. Remember the Chinese leader coming and getting a ride in the carriage with the Queen. And then almost the day after Cameron resigns or leaves office, he sets up an investment fund to go after investment opportunities in China. So this, in some respects, has been a bipartisan achievement over the years. But now it is largely the conservative people from the conservative side of this who have been sounding the alarm for a while now, saying enough's enough.
It's pretty interesting. And if you look at some of the things that are happening in the UK, you've got some pretty wild laws on freedom of speech. And I know we have to be mature people, but I think basic freedom of speech is freedom of speech. Otherwise, it's not. And I understand, you've got some laws, but it does remind me a little bit of China because they're not that well known for human rights. In fact, quite the opposite. So we have that similarity at the moment, and it's ramping up. And then you notice even some local media, UK column has gone very much towards China. Jokingly here at work, we refer to it as the China column because they have so much propaganda on about China, and you think, what's actually happening to the UK? Then you got the government with its super embassy. I won't say fiasco, but people say, they can still nick information anyway. Well, if you're a foot away from all this data, this cables with all this data backwards and forwards, it surely, if that was in the US, you'd have a big no. Why do you think? We saw that the government downplayed it. We saw that even a lot of the media downplayed it and said, it's just rubbish. It's nothing to be worried about. Why would a government allow their society to start moving away from their common values? And that started a long time ago, but it certainly is being ramped up at the moment. And then you have this super embassy from the Chinese. Yes, you can build it there. Don't worry about that cable. We trust you. It's very, very stupid, isn't it?
It is. I've heard it excused away on the grounds, well, if they do espionage where the British counterintelligence guys will be all over them. Well, I don't think Britain's counterintelligence service is that big to cover it. And the Chinese will have any number of people, a lot of them out and about, and as I said, subverting. And Ultimately, however, what I would say is this is an act of submission on the part of His Majesty's government. They don't have the nerve, the courage to just tell the Chinese no. Instead, they make it look like a statesman-like thing and claim, well, we get to fix up our own embassy in China. That's not a very good excuse. But the Chinese know that the British will roll over for them. And it is, as I said, an act of submission on the part of England, and that is what the Chinese are after. And there's a psychological aspect to all of this as well, into the just the practical benefits of having a platform like this that you can use to really send spies, influence assets out. And as I said, you'd have to probably expand the size of whatever it is, MI5, to probably by 10 times to handle all the Chinese that would be out and about. But this is something that scares the daylights out of people who say are trying to get in Britain, who are trying to get away from the Chinese. You've seen at other Chinese facilities where they've come out and beaten up protesters, and the British government does nothing. We have our own problems in that regard, but this is really a suggestion that the British don't have the nerve to defend themselves. I think if the Germans had waited probably 85 years, they'd have walked right in. Seems like a completely different place. And what you described earlier is something that looks very much like the Chinese social credit system, where if you say the wrong thing, suddenly the police show up at your door. You just have trouble going about your daily life. Canada sees something similar. So this is not a good trend, but there are plenty of people in Britain who do not like this, and maybe things will shift. One hopes. But what I've seen is, as I said, when you grew up with the Battle of Britain or hearing about it, that you wonder, what species of people is this who now live in this place?
My dad used to tell me he flew a Spitfire. He lied to me. I believed him for many years because he was my father and a policeman. And there you are. I will never be a spy. Actually, speaking about some putrid and interesting things, I see that Lord Mendelssohn, he was part of worked very closely with the Chagos deals and the British tabloids suggesting that Epstein worked for the Russians. I mean, how to protect yourselves? Oh, we'll pick on the Russians. I'm afraid this time they're probably way off course. But if you're looking for leaks and stuff, I mean, looking for reasons to have a big overhaul with the British government. Look at Mendelssohn, look at the Chagos deal, look at the cozying up to China, and all this sort of stuff. It's a bit unsettling, isn't it? And you would suggest that this government, as with other British governments, and that they're not alone, have been a bit suspect when it comes to confidentiality and trust.
Oh, you would have to. I think I haven't followed it that closely, but I've known of this Mendelssohn fellow. Besides being a creep, I think one fairly would say this would warrant a counterintelligence review from top to bottom and see what sort of damage has been done. And I can't imagine that we don't have some idea already where it is. And if the betting is on a Russian connection, I'd say it's probably somewhere else. But this is pretty bad. And the fact that he was put in place, there is no good explanation for it. And heads ought to roll as a result of this. But this is bad.
Yeah, and you look at even Bill Gates from Microsoft, and he was discussing with Epstein how they could, maybe this is the Russian connection, how they could minimize contacting certain things when you mix with women who do things, and sometimes they have this disease. Anyway, they were from the Russians. Apparently, the Russian women of the night, or escorts, Bill and Epstein, they contracted something. Anyway, so maybe that's a Russian connection. Who knows? Serves them right, by the way. Just quickly as we wind this up, your views on AUKUS still going ahead?
It could, and I think AUKUS is a good deal. I like it, and credit to the Biden administration for bringing it to fruition. It started before them, but it's a good plan. Where I'm concerned is I don't know that Britain has the money for it to build another submarine, and I don't know that a Labour government even wants to. So I've got, unfortunately, when it comes to the submarine end of it, I wonder. I think the Australians are sincere enough, but although their defense policy is a bit of a mess. And the Americans, we just don't have enough space to build subs, but we could probably figure that one out. But if the submarine part I'm worried about in terms of technology cooperation between the parties to AUKUS, there's a lot of opportunity there. There is some good work that's being done. So it's a good deal. But once again, you're going to have to get out the checkbook, and I'm not sure the Labour government in Britain is willing to do that.
The Australian government's selling a whole bunch of military bases to raise money. But we're in a good state too. We're going well.
That's pretty bad. I like it's.
Do you want to buy one?
I would. Yeah, these are great places. I mean, the ones that are used and the ones even which are sort of old historic places.
Do you think that raised eyebrows in Washington?
Well, it should, but then again, it's the Australian. One, it's Australia. Who are we to tell them? And what do you expect from, really a Labour government in Australia? But it's and these people will do anything to, what is it this case to help fund their student loan forgiveness scheme, whatever the excuse is. And what are they? They're talking about $2 billion. That they're going to earn from all of this for us. That's like 10 minutes of Medicare fraud. It's not a huge amount of money. That's going to make any difference. And I may even more reflect just a fundamental anti-military sort of thinking that you find in that part of the political spectrum in Australia. I think it's unfortunate to take these places and turn them into really condos for rich people.
But you know what I'd be doing, first of all? I would, before I went and cut the front lawn, I would get one of those things that detect metal. You go on beaches just in case something hasn't gone off.
That too. You'd find some good stuff too if you were a mudlark. It'd be a good investment in that case.
Excuse me, operator. It's ticking. What should I do? A run. Okay, goodbye. And a few Hail Marys along the way. Grant Newsham, it's a pleasure. I wish I was there with you in Hawaii. I drive everybody nuts, including my wife, who loves Hawaii. And we are contemplating sort of where we would like to live, to put down our roots and stuff. And, we think it's a magnificent part of the world, and I'm jealous, but I will talk to you.
Yeah. There's no alligators in Queensland or in Hawaii, so you won't get eaten by anything.
Well, there's not much there at all, which is fantastic. No awful biteys. I mean, they go nuts when they find a snake.
There's almost none that they know of, but they don't have the crocodile doesn't live there. So in that sense, you're probably not going to get eaten by a crocodile. There are sharks, but nothing like Australia.
Yeah, you've got to be careful of those sharks on the corner of Kalakaua and Seaside and stuff. I mean, they're pretty wild. They'll snaffle you for anything. Grant Newsham, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
I'm on X, Newsham Grant. And if you look at Center for Security Policy and just type my name in, you'll see just about everything that I do.
Absolutely brilliant. Enjoyed the conversation very much. Have a great night and mahalo. Grant,
thanks.
This is The World Today.
Surprisingly, the blueprint for transformation is woven into the United Nations Agenda 2030, ostensibly a vision for a better world.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I say again that taken together, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Climate Agreement provide humanity with a master plan for a sustainable way of life on this planet.
New York City, late September 2024, the setting for the United Nations Summit of the Future, a gathering of member nations to reinforce and accelerate Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The plan has a broad spectrum and is full of worthy ambition. But behind those deliberately bright and colourful boxes lies a darker theme, a shifting of influence and potentially power towards unelected world bodies. The strategy goes back well into the last century, and pressure is growing, because the goals are far behind targets set at the grand relaunching in 2015.
17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our aim is clear, our mission is possible, and our destination is in our sights.
To end poverty and hunger, address inequality, protect our planet, and build a life of dignity for all.
It appears to be a noble and ambitious program for a perfect world. And who could argue with those aspirations? But critics insist the goals are not what they seem. Alex Newman is a journalist and broadcaster who's been investigating the issue for 15 years. He has his own way of interpreting the rhetoric.
You have to learn to speak what I call UNEs. You have to know what the terms mean if you want to truly understand what is being discussed. When they talk about peacekeeping forces or the peacekeeping role of the United Nations, they're actually talking about the war-making capabilities of the United Nations. So you have this Orwellian doublespeak. When they talk about transparency, more often than not, they're talking about eliminating your privacy. Human rights is another very, very good example. They make very clear in this document that your rights can be restricted under the guise of public order or morality or whatever the case may be. And so they're saying, here's your rights, but by the way, they're not really rights. We can revoke them at any time. The UN is filled with contradictions like this. Like, for example, when they talk about gender equality, right? A normal person in the Western world thinks gender equality means a woman has a right to earn money, to own property, to have all the rights and privileges that a man would have. When you look at the individuals who lead this movement within the UN, you're talking about radical feminists. You're talking about people who are very interested in dissolving the nuclear family. As you dig into these goals, it's very clear we're dealing with something far more nefarious. Once you look past the marketing slogans, the kind of warm and fuzzy, we're going to end hunger, which again is just window dressing, you realize that this is actually a blank check for totalitarian global control.
Author and campaigner, the late Rosa Koire, called out the plan more than a decade ago.
It is the biggest public relations scam in the history of the world. But it's far more than that. It's a blueprint. It is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all information, all energy, all means of production, and all human beings in the world.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk. The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. It's 20 to 7 in the UK. Get up. Stop it. Just get out of bed now. Be brave. You don't need nice weather. I'm wearing shorts below this. Greg Simons, I don't know what he's wearing below the camera, but we won't venture there at all, but who knows. Now, the House Judiciary Committee Republicans have just released a 160-page interim report compiling subpoenaed communications that allege the European Commission under Ursula von der Leyen coerced social media platforms into censoring COVID-19 and vaccine content worldwide, affecting US users. I'm shocked that she would do something bad. Now, the report details over 90 meetings from 2022 to 2024 targeting anti-migrant views, populist rhetoric, and election-related content ahead of elections in countries such as the Netherlands, Romania, and France, with platforms often complying to dodge massive fines. While the EU calls the claims nonsense, Republican Jim Jordan labelled it, hang on, do that right, nonsense. That's how she talks. She's coming to Australia too. We're having some great leaders come here, or people who think they're leaders. She's not a leader. Anyway, Jim Jordan labelled it a threat to free speech, prompting a February 4 hearing. Now, Dr. Greg Simons is a geopolitical commentator and a professor based at the Department of Journalism, Media and Communications at Daffodil International University in Bangladesh. Also has expertise on Russian mass media, terrorism, public diplomacy, the relationship between politics, information and armed conflict, and the list just goes on. Now, he is currently working in the role of information and communications in contemporary geopolitics. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Mike. We make a fantastic PC tag team.
I always get into trouble when I talk to you after. Apparently, I'm a bit flippant, but I enjoy it because I think you're equally as flippant at times as I am.
Oh, how could you say such a thing? I'm just such a poster child for this sensitive new age guy.
There you are. I've just got into trouble again. Good on you. Hey, what are your thoughts on the US report? Most of it was known anyway, but von der Leyen, they call her Lion, von der Leyen. We have to say von der Leyen, but I mean the EU and von der Leyen and a whole lot of them. Look at Macron and these people, and the UK, they must hate information getting out that shows that they've been telling porkies about people's health and security and choices when it comes to elections.
Well, absolutely. They're against any kind of transparency because that will bring accountability. We just look at these cretins and how they blather and blither around on the public stage. They're in a state of desperation. This is why one of the things which I came across some years ago is this obsession of the EU, which I refer to as the EUSSR, as being this policy of speak with one voice. So that is to have this kind of monotonous repetition of one narrative. And you can see how they try that as a kind of control, because censorship, it's not about necessarily blocking unwanted information. That's the means. The goal of censorship is to be able to define what is reality by making sure some contradictory information doesn't go there to compete with the garbage that these clowns put out.
Someone said to me the other day that they think the EU would love all the countries just to disappear and become this one great big country run by Queen von der Leyen and all the other that dreadful leaders or elitists, because they are truly a. You put them on a boat, wouldn't you? If you had a chance, and drill a few holes in the boat and push them out into shark-infested waters, because they are not very good people at all.
Well, I think you're too diplomatic and too lenient on them. I have something far more diabolical to do with them. But yeah, I mean, these ones are rent seekers. They serve no good function for the public, but they just sit there abusing their position for power, prestige, and of course the underlying thing. What is the status of their bank account? Because for some reason they seem to have a lot of money. I mean, and there's zero transparency. I think one of the more memorable moments, I think you've probably seen it, is when von der Leyen went to Helsinki and was giving a speech, and she was heckled by this Finnish guy in the crowd. And she was lecturing him. Well, just as well you're in Finland, because if you did this in Russia, you'd be arrested. And you see these Finnish cops coming like this, and they arrested the guy while she was saying that if he was, be thankful he wasn't in Russia, because otherwise he'd be arrested. So their, should we say, grasp of reality is limited, if we put it this way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm just reading here, the American government, they have announced, this is part of the this information. And this is what the EU have been doing. This is their active censoring on online activity. Let me read it out. They would censor, this is from the US government, populist rhetoric, anti-government, anti-EU, anti-elite content, political satire, I'm going to go to hell for that one, anti-migrant and Islamophobic, anti-refugee, as they destroy Europe with the so many Africans it's killed it, anti-immigrant sentiment, in other words, we don't want our country taken over, anti-LGBTQI content, and anti-LGBTQ XYZ, all the others too, content, and meme subculture. And so what we have is, we have the EU under von der Leyen and all the other henchmen or henchwomen come elitist, and they are making life very, very difficult for those in the EU, and wherever they can get their hands on a particular leader, they will wrestle that person to the ground until they also agree in their ways. And that's why, if you look at Spain, for example, Spain have embraced Australia's e-safety under 16 ban on social content and stuff online. They're embracing that as they also welcomed 500,000 new African citizens in Spain so they can vote for them. So we have the whole of the EU and the whole of the world following this way of shutting everybody down. How can we stop? What do we have to do to stop the EU?
That's a good question, because I mean,
sorry about that.
The whole point about COVID and the Ukraine conflict, they've used this to federalize and centralize as much power as possible, and they've been quite successful at doing it. Generally speaking, there is little or no pushback, with the exception of a few in the European Parliament. But generally speaking, they're given carte blanche. I mean, the main thing to stop them would be transparency, which brings accountability, which is why they're trying to censor everything. And of course, the what would you call the political commissars of the EUSSR, such as von der Leyen and the other stooges, they don't do humour because they are humourless people, and they cannot understand this, which is why that humour is and satire is so effective against them. You've got these different memes, you've got these different jokes, because this is eating away at them. And I mean, I think that this dystopian ideological project of this kind of globalist, liberalist entity that the EU is representing is going to come to an end by itself, because it's not sustainable, not socially, not politically, and definitely not economically. Which is why you got this desperation. This is why they're banning political parties, political entities, whether it be in France, or this attempt in Germany to call Alternative for Deutschland as an extremist organisation, what happened in Romania with the elections. But also, I mean, in spite of all this, Orban is still there, Fico is still there, and now you have what in Czechia, you've got someone who is critical. Not to mention in Poland, I mean, the EU candidate, I mean, Tusk is still there, and I mean, he is a real EUSSR swamp creature for sure. But Nowrotsky, who is not, is there. So, and as long as they keep on pushing these unpopular and self-destructive policies, they're causing their own decline, because eventually people push back against this, and you can see the beginnings of it. Maybe a little too late, but yeah, I mean, they're going to kill the host.
But let me just read this out to you. the US House Judiciary Committees, this is how magnificent the EU is. I truly love them to fall into a volcano. X wants us to fall into a volcano, by the way. We're at tier 1. But there's another story. It requires me to have a scotch, which Basil Valentine knows much about, but I'll talk to him after this hour. The reason Basil, you're not allowed to talk yet. And now, the US House Judiciary, this is for Greg, committee's Republican majority, they've released this report, alleging the European Commission, let me read this, coerced platforms like TikTok, X, Meta, and Google into censoring speech globally. And again, I'm shocked they would do such a thing, including in America through voluntary codes. And I need your opinion on this one, because we talked about it a lot at TNT Radio. The 2023 Digital Services Act. Now, X refused that, and we see the love that has been spread because of that and other issues through the UK. Let's have an investigation. Australia, let's have an investigation, but they haven't done anything wrong. Oh, we don't care, we're going after X. Now, by the way, I have to say categorically, I do not believe X is for free speech. It is selective speech, but they have a right to have that speech. And so Elon, who we used to have his dad on, did us no good. Elon, it's a business he's running. He's pretending that you have free speech, but you really haven't, because no one's going to see you. But he deserves to have that right to be able to let people have a say. And people deserve that right to have that right too. So what we have is we have this 2023 Digital Services Act, which will basically go after anybody and who's anybody, and they will go after users, such as in the UK. They will jail them, do what they can to make their life miserable, just to shut them up. What's your views on the 2023 Digital Services Act?
Well, absolutely. It's a Trojan horse for censorship, because it's done in the name of something good. But really, if you look underneath, what is it bringing in? It's bringing in an excuse for censorship, because the point is who judges what is good, what is decent. It's the same cretins that have no sense of humour and want to block everything they don't like ideologically. And at the same time, mutter these what have become meaningless slogans of democracy, rule of law, and respect for human rights at the same time. I think the General Data Protection Regulation is also another problematic issue, which is being used to strangle things too. So, I mean, it's death of free speech by over-regulation.
Yes, there is, and I totally agree. I'm just going to turn down some I hear some noises coming through at the moment. Tell me, we've talked about how they want to shut everybody down and want to just make sure that you're pushed in the back blocks or jailed, as in the UK. Why would the US, pretends to be the leader for free speech, but Pam Bondi late last year said we have to stop hate speech online, and we will do it. And surely that's the First Amendment first of all. But if you start drilling out hate speech, what you're doing is you have a group of people or one person, and that person or group of people's views, they're going to say, that was hate speech, but it's free speech. And unless you invite someone to go and chop someone's head off, you should be able to say we delight, but this hate speech stuff, which all the governments, the UK, the US government, if you look at Pam Bondi, look at Australia, New Zealand, look at Canada if you have to.
Yeah.
And they're always, but you have to, you just must look at Canada right now. That's your penance for getting me into trouble after the show. But I'm just thinking though, this hate speech, it really is an excuse just to shut you up, isn't it?
It's incremental creep on censorship. You begin slowly and then you start winding up and cranking it up, because what do they call it? That frog in the pot, if you heat the water slowly, the frog doesn't realise and it gets cooked without trying to escape. So if we look at this as an analogy, because this is how it starts. I mean, hate speech. Who defines hate speech, and what is it? And then hate speech replaces free speech. And even if there's no legal basis, they try to put a moral or ethical judgment on the legal framework, which doesn't allow for such things. But you have essentially feelings trumping the legal system and framework of law. And so, but this is how they do it. It begins this way, and then once they go to one level, then successfully do that, then they go for the next level, and then just gradually take it out in the name of democracy, freedom, and tolerance.
Yeah, it's a very scary world, and I often say if government want to do what they want to do, they're going to do it. And I don't know how we can stop it. I'm not sure we can comment on it. But yeah, we really, unless you're a larger organisation or media-wise, you really, I mean, we're like the French resistance. I got you, and then they get you. We. So it's
Well,
sorry.
yeah, well, I mean, if you look at it, this whole ethical and moralization trumping law, just look at how the EUSSR is sanctioning these different individuals. There is no legal basis for the sanctions. There is no court action. There is no ability to defend yourself, but you're morally and ethically judged in a very subjective manner with little right of self-defense. And this is done in the name of tolerance and democracy and security. So this is a prime example. And this is they're doing it not only to Swiss citizens, but their own citizens. And by sanctioning them, I mean, you're erasing them. And I mean, you have this situation now where I don't know if you saw, but Weiwei, who is this Chinese artist dissident who left mainland China decades ago, I think, returned to China after 10 years. He's residing in Germany. And one of the first remarks which shocked all of these EU SSR cretins was the fact that he said, life in China now is freer than in Germany. And so, I mean, this is coming from a guy who's a dissident who fled from China as a dissident and now living a not so free life in Germany, and is shocked by what has happened, because he said it's swapped. China he left is like Germany today.
Look, we've had a magnificent conversation. Thank you for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about you, Dr. Greg Simons, how do they do that?
Well, I can be found on these different things, ResearchGate. I occasionally post something on X, and Propaganda in Focus. I've been writing a few politically incorrect things for these guys on different topics. So generally, and on YouTube with these different, such as TRT World and so forth, where I exercise my freedom of speech and expression in the jungle because it's no longer possible in the garden.
Yep, very good. Dr. Greg Simons, thank you for your time. After the news, we're going to have the protagonists with a dear friend. Haven't spoken to him, well, I've spoken to him a bit, but hasn't been on the show with me for such a long time. Hopefully he will recover. This is The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. U.S. President Donald Trump stated the Russian President Vladimir Putin honored a week-long pause in strikes on Kyiv and other major Ukrainian cities requested by Trump due to extreme cold and to aid negotiations. Trump told reporters Tuesday the truce ran Sunday to Sunday, ending February 1st, and Putin kept his word, though Russia resumed heavy attacks afterward. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed the moratorium until February 1st for favorable negotiation conditions amid U.S. brokered talks in Abu Dhabi. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged no targeted energy strikes during the pause, but accused Russia of violations post-expiration, including overnight attacks. Ukraine faces severe blackouts from prior Russian strikes on energy infrastructure amid sub-zero temperatures. Moscow says it targets defense-related sites, not civilians.
It was Sunday to Sunday, and it opened up, and he hit him hard last night. No, he agreed. He kept his word on that. It's a lot. 1 week is, we'll take anything because it's really, really cold over there. But it was on Sunday, and he went from Sunday to Sunday.
Are you disappointed he didn't go further or go?
Yeah, I would like to. I want him to end the war. I spoke to him. I want him to end the war.
A Kiev International Institute of Sociology poll conducted January 23rd to the 29th with 1,003 phone respondents found 42% of Ukrainians view the current government as completely tainted, wanting none of its members to remain in power after the Russia conflict ends, while 48% believe it includes some real professionals who could stay. Declared trust in President Volodymyr Zelensky is 61%, but an experimental question about an imaginary acquaintance's view dropped it to 53%. Only 25% completely trust him as sincere sympathizers. The rest may support him due to wartime leadership needs. Zelensky's term expired in May of 2024, but martial law prevents elections. He hinted at seeking another term amid corruption scandals. Retired U.S. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of U.S. Army Europe, told the Oslo Security Conference on Monday that Russia is absolutely at war with Europe, even if Europe is too timid to admit it. He criticized NATO European members as naive and unable to defend themselves, urging them to acknowledge the threat, impose costs on Russia, and stop being timid. Hodges described Russian actions like sabotage of undersea cables and airport drone disruptions as deliberate hybrid gray zone warfare to erode trust and distract from Ukraine support. A Trump critic who endorsed Kamala Harris in 2024, he agreed with Trump that Europe must take defense seriously, quipping, "You were Vikings, for God's sake." Lord Peter Mandelson, former UK ambassador to the US and Labour figure nicknamed Prince of Darkness, resigned from the House of Lords effective February 4th, following pressure from Prime Minister Keir Starmer and revelations in newly released US Department of Justice Epstein documents. The Metropolitan Police launched a criminal investigation into the 72-year-old for alleged misconduct in public office after emails appeared to show him sharing confidential government information with Jeffrey Epstein while business secretary under Gordon Brown.
Near government. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Cabinet Secretary, with my support, took the decision to refer material to the police. And there is now a criminal investigation. I've instructed my team to draft legislation to strip Mandelson of his title and wider legislation to remove disgraced peers. And this morning, I've agreed with His Majesty the King that Mandelson should be removed from the list of Privy Councillors on grounds that he's brought the reputation of the Privy Council into disrepute.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Here, and imagine coming in here and you've got a child to bring in as well. Imagine trying to make it a home for them because they've got to share it as well, and this is an imprint for their future. So you can see what this place is like. We wander across in my room. As you can see, there's very little space. His bed to make him comfortable, pictures on the walls. That's my own cupboard I have to bring in. Well, it's Friday night. It's almost 11 o'clock. There's been a major row or something like that occurring in the other end of the block. I've got nowhere to go to, so I'm here with my son. This weekend there was a little bit of aggravation, okay, a lot of shouting and things like that, right? How did that make you feel?
Bit annoyed.
Why did it make you annoyed?
Because of shouting, bad words and stuff.
I really need to get out of this place.
The climate right now is no warmer than it's been many times throughout history. Our baseline is now the lowest that carbon dioxide has been in 600 million years. As far as temperature change, the IPCC's first report of 1992 showed that the medieval warm period was warmer than the present. Well, this didn't fit the narrative, so by the time the 1996 report came out, it was a completely contrived graph called the hockey stick. So what they did was they got rid of the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age, and so instead of the graph doing this, they flattened it out, and then they added instrumental record on the end that looks like it's going way up. The point is that the people that are calling them out on it are not getting the media coverage. You know, because look, at this point there's billions of dollars going into the whole climate change narrative.
A hoax about carbon dioxide in the climate has caused a global energy and economic disaster. This is today's News Talk, The World Today. With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Really enjoyed the protagonists, some great guests. We always get magnificent guests, and Jen does a magnificent job in putting that together, so thank you very much. By the way, if you're off to work, it's I think it's in the UK, it's about just after 16 past 8, heading off to work. In Victoria, New South Wales, you're having a coldie at the moment. It's 16 past 7 in the evening. Queensland, of course, though, it's 16 past 6 in the evening, so you're just about be getting home now. Now, Israel's Prime Minister's 5-day state visit to Australia from February 8 to 12 is set to cause a major upset. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called it right to invite Herzog to honour those lost in the Bondi massacre and support the Jewish community. Prime Minister Herzog, however, faces severe criticism from many groups. UN investigator Chris Sidotti demands Herzog's arrest over past Gaza remarks, labelled as incitement, and protest are planned for February 9 in 24 cities. And you should, if you want to protest, if it's peaceful, then you should do it. It is your right. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Now, marches are banned, though, in Sydney under Chairman Minns, because he wants to make sure you can say what you are allowed to say, government willing, and he doesn't want you to have a voice. He wants you to just go away, because he's Chairman Minns at the moment. Now, these laws in New South Wales are meant to deter protesters of their right to assemble. Ian Rintoul is a member of Stop War on Palestine. He has spent many years as an anti-war activist and will talk to us about what is planned on Monday. First of all, got to thank Ian Rintoul for joining us. Ian, tell us about your organisation, and by the way, job well done.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, we've been very, very busy since October 2023, but in particular over the last period, Stop the War on Palestine has been probably the major organisation in Sydney which has taken up the fight against the Chris Minns's ban on it's not just a ban on street marches, it's a ban on demonstrations. They've introduced legislation that allows them to declare any area of New South Wales a public area, a public assembly restriction declaration, and they've done that over a whole chunk of Sydney. Sydney. Stop the War in Palestine has called, to protests explicitly against, those restrictions, and we're part of a much wider coalition that's organising to give Isaac Herzog the reception he deserves. Of course, we've been calling consistently for Anthony Albanese to rescind the invitation, but if Herzog shows up on Monday, there will be mass demonstrations right across Australia and in Sydney, in spite of Chris Minns's attempts to outlaw protests.
Chairman Minns and Anthony Albanese underestimated the extent of anger out there at the moment.
They've badly underestimated, but I think it's an example of just how much out of touch the Albanese government has been with community sentiment opposed, to genocide. We've got a Labor government that, continues to deny somehow that Australia is actually exporting F-35 parts. It's exporting, armoured steel, and yet we continue to get denials, from the Labor government that this kind of complicity is actually in place. The Albanese is incapable of being, critical of, Donald Trump over the genocide in Gaza. He's been invited to sit on the peace board. Now, I expect he will reject that after Herzog leaves, but in spite of dismissing it out of hand, the absurd proposition, that Trump could be anything that he created could be a border peace in Gaza. Albanese's been quiet about that, and now since Bondi and the shootings in Bondi, there is a very real attempt to go on the offensive to try and somehow blame the Palestine demonstrations and the opposition to genocide in Gaza for the shootings in Bondi, and we've seen introducing extraordinary, legislation, both at Albanese at a federal level and Minns at a state level.
Mm. What are you expecting on Monday? How many do you expect to appear?
Look, it's very hard to predict. I think there is a lot of anger, and there have been many organisations which come out explicitly, including very significant politicians in the Labor Party. We've seen the most significant break inside the Labor Party over Herzog's visit. So we're expecting perhaps up to 10,000. We'd like to double that, but if we got 10,000 to 20,000 in Sydney on Monday night, we'll be quite pleased with that.
I'm just thinking on Monday in New South Wales, that the police will be out in full force. This could get very, very ugly, couldn't it? How do we alleviate? I mean, people say just don't go. No, you have a right, and I don't give a crap. I don't care at all what Chairman Minns says. You're Australian, and you have a right to peacefully protest. You have a right to be heard and seen. And there is no disrespect at all to those that were maimed and killed on that terrible day in Bondi. None at all. This is far more extensive than that. And it must distress you when you see politicians and the media, and not always, and sometimes the independent media, how they say what a terrible organisation to stand up for the Palestinians. 70,000 have been killed. That's according more. We know there's more, but the IDF says 70,000 were killed. So if you want to protest about the genocide of a particular group of people, then you should. If it's peaceful, it's your right too. So how do we temper and if they say I'm inciting a riot, I'm not, because I want to know how we're going to make it peaceful. And that's your right to have a peaceful march.
I think in many respects the onus is actually on the state government and on the police. I mean, there haven't been violent Palestinian demonstrations in Sydney. The Palestine Action Group and others, Stop the War in Palestine, have been organizing demonstrations for two and a half years, and some of them have been 50,000. the estimates of up to perhaps 200, 300,000, walked across the bridge in, a very, very obvious expression of community sentiment against genocide. So no one's setting out to organise any kind of violent protest on Monday. People may insist on their right to march. I said we're continuing to appeal to the government and the police to facilitate the march. The police have the discretion to be able to facilitate the march, and that would be the simplest thing to do. They've got the declaration in place. The declaration doesn't preclude a peaceful assembly, even though it does give powers, extraordinary powers, in my opinion, to the police to actually move on peaceful assembly if they deem it to be some kind of obstruction, or it's generating fear or intimidating some reasonable person nearby. Just absurd. I don't think they will try to interfere with the actual assembly taking place. As I said, we've had a couple of them already, but they may attempt to stop any attempt to march. We're going to continue to push that issue on Monday night. We've made it clear that we want to go from Town Hall to Parliament House to exercise our right to march, but we're not intending to go there with to get into scuffles with the police. We want the police to facilitate as they reasonably should.
Yeah, it's funny. My family have been, or father was a copper, and we have lots of good friends who are police people. And so sometimes, but for a while, if you looked at Victoria with COVID, it was terrible. It was just absolutely terrible what happened to the citizens of Victoria by the police on the bequest of the government. However, having said that, you wouldn't want to be a copper right now, would you? Because these marches, they're not, and you get some excitable people at times, but they're mums and dads and your next door neighbours and stuff who are out there to make a point that they object to what's happening to the Palestinians. So to be a copper, to have to carry out a command from the government, from, for example, Chairman Minns, that must make them feel very uncomfortable. It must make you feel uncomfortable too, because once those police are out of their uniforms, they could be your next door neighbour, but they're doing a job which is not, which is very hard, but they're carrying out a directive which is, in my opinion, quite wrong and probably illegal if you wanted to push it. So how do these marches? How do we navigate through this ridiculous and obscene directive from Chairman Minns? How do we have that peace? And part two of this is that, is there a holiday in New South Wales around Australia? I thought Monday was a work day.
Monday is a work day, but the demonstrations were big in spite of the fact that it's a work day. They've been called for 5:30 in all the cities, by recollection. So a lot of people will be coming, after work. It's one of the things which will mean, that perhaps they're 20,000 and not 50,000, because it's very clear that community sentiment is against Albanese and Minns on this. It's against there is even bigger sentiment, I think, against Minns's anti-protest laws, and the police find themselves in an invidious situation. I mean, it's their call under the legislation, although Minns makes it very clear what he expects the police to do. But we've got an absurd situation in Sydney where, perhaps 500 metres away, actually the restriction, the declaration doesn't cover Hyde Park, is excised from the declaration. So it's very clear. Even the police have tried to find some ways out of the quandary that they're in. They recognise there is enormous community sentiment against Herzog and enormous anger against what he actually represents as the agency of genocide, the Israeli government and genocide in Gaza, and what he represents in terms of the welcoming by the government. There's extraordinary anger about that. So again, I simply make the point we'll be continuing to appeal to the police to exercise the discretion that they have to facilitate a march. And if we don't get to march on Monday, we'll certainly be marching very shortly after that.
Can I just get your views on the on the new hate speech laws and all the new laws that were enacted after Bondi?
Look, we reject them. There will be challenges. There'll be constitutional challenges to the laws that Albanese has introduced. There are Supreme Court challenges to the ones that Minns has introduced and is in the process of introducing. He's talking about introducing legislation to actually ban the slogan of globalise the Intifada. I mean, absolutely absurd. Victoria is talking about trying to ape the legislation or the police powers that Britain has. That's seen people saying they're supporting Palestine action, being arrested. That's the quality of it. Some of the laws of trying to rule out whether there's actual judicial review of it. The ASIO and the Home Affairs ministers been extraordinary powers to ban organisations on evidence that they will never actually be able to see or to challenge. Like we're talking about legislation that anywhere else would be condemned as being the kind of thing we expect from the authoritarian Iranian regime or such like. But that's what that's the scale, that's the scope of the powers that both at the federal level and the state level the government is trying to implement. And what's very clear about it is that it is directed to the Palestinian campaign. It's directed to the Palestinian movement. They barely attempt to hide that. Legislation they're looking at in state parliament today is about the state government enshrining the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism in their efforts to try and equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and then to enforce, they're already by regulation enforcing some of these measures on universities, on teachers, on public servants to the extent that they can. I mean, these are measures that we haven't seen in Australia, and I think anywhere else they would be condemned as extraordinarily authoritarian.
I totally agree. If somebody wants to find out more about the marches, how they could become part of it, right around Australia, is there a general website that they can go to?
Yes, they can look at Stop the War on Palestine. The Palestine Action Group has got all the there's a number of groups actually, but look at Palestine Action Group, Stop the War on Palestine. They'll find all the information they need to be part of the protests on Monday.
Absolutely brilliant, Ian. Thank you so much for your time. Ian Rintoul there, here on The World Today.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne, one woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realised, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important. And when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important. And that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that?
My favorite quote is, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody." My intention wasn't to actually start a charity. It was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Baby.
We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge that the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
I just love that commercial, by the way. Well, public service announcement, community service announcement. We often see homeless around our area. Hopefully, I won't become one of those. Going to work very hard, and they have pets, and the pets are their best friend. So it's nice to know that there are good people out there trying to do their bit for humanity. Now, in the absence of a national government probe, independent MP Rupert Lowe crowdfunded and launched his own rape gang inquiry. He recently held 10 days of public hearings in London, and survivors shared harrowing stories, including one claiming rape by 600 to 700 men. When I read that before, I felt like vomiting. And multiple witnesses alleging police handed girls back to abusers while apologising to the rapist. They will get their own comeuppance one day. It's terrible, isn't it? The inquiry reminded people of past scandals in Rotherham, Rockdale and Telford, where authorities overlooked abuse. These people, I'll leave that and I'll talk to Catherine Blakelock, because and she'll have some ideas. She's been a strong critic of the government's lack of action on grooming gangs. Catherine was UKIP's economics spokesperson and founder of the Brexit Party. She's worked all over the world in big and small businesses. Catherine Blakelock, thank you so much for joining us. It's just terrible. It's 600 to 700. Those coppers should be in jail.
It's an establishment stitch-up, and the establishment stitch-up is going on as we speak this minute. The grooming gang or rape gang inquiry is still going on, and the BBC and all the main newspapers have not covered it.
Oh, that's just shocking, isn't it? But it does say a lot about society, and because we're talking about those that were elected by communities. Is there something wrong with society, or are they just dumb?
Well, I think we can trace it back to sort of Fabian communist roots, back to the 1920s and the long march to the institutions. And we've had progressively left-wing governments, left-wing institutions, even when they've been nominally right-wing. You have to remember that this has been going on through Conservative governments as well as Labour governments, and it carries on going on today. You will see that Reform, who are supposedly, a far-right group or right, they're not really covering it at all either. As Rupert Lowe's inquiry was going on yesterday, Nigel Farage was talking about pubs. So we have the long march through the institutions. You've had that in Australia as well. We can see the radical results of that going on in Spain, and this is where the problem lies. Jess Phillips, the women's minister for women and equity and all those sort of things, protection of women, promised to have inquiries, promised to speak to survivors and help survivors, and they've done nothing. The councils have done nothing. In fact, they've done more than nothing. They've tried to cover up at every point. So we have the Pakistani rapists as one point, but the issue really is that they were allowed to do this. So we have corruption on a major scale. We have in one of the examples, there was a book written called Just a Child by Woodhouse, and it's well worth reading. It changes your view of life. But basically, these people were also involved in drug gangs, in hanging people out of windows, of nailing girls' tongues to tables, of firebombing houses, of threatening, and these are in working class streets. So where the community had changed from being all white to then maybe being 50-50, and then you had Pakistani police people, we had solicitors, we have magistrates, we have taxi drivers, on-call barristers, and so it's through the entire society. And essentially, it's been allowed to happen. That's the issue, and it's still going on as we speak. Sadiq Khan has not had any inquiries in London, and it carries on, and it will carry on. And I can't see really, until we got a major change of government, what is going to change it. It's going to need a revolutionary type of change throughout the civil service. And obviously, the Labour government and now the Green Party are very concerned about those Muslim bloc votes. And you can even see Nigel Farage courting those 6-7 million votes, which are growing. So this is the issue, and it's very difficult. It's a very difficult problem.
Look, we've just had all these revelations coming out about Jeffrey Epstein, and with Lord Mandelson, you got former Prince Andrew, and Tony Blair has been mentioned in the dispatches, and it just goes on and on. It really does show you that government, the ones that have been elected, no matter which side they're from at the moment, that they act like slugs, and it must impress you that you have to answer, or you have to do what these slugs are telling the community to do. And their lack of response from and I'm going to say it, they're slugs, these evil, smelly, revolting people that masquerade as government ministers and the elite of your country. I look at the other, in Ireland, I think it was, not Tuwin, anyway, it was the 800 children, babies that were put into a septic tank, and the inquiry stopped. They had an invitation from the police to have information for them, and it stopped. So I see that they are actually slugs. Doesn't it impress you that all these things that are coming out from the elite, and that they will continue to do so? How do you keep them accountable? It must make Rupert Lowe want to vomit, because he's just uncovered, again, more evidence, and basically not much is going to happen.
This evidence has been uncovered many times. This is just the latest iteration of it. It was uncovered by the Times. It was uncovered the first by the British National Party in the 2000s, late 1990s. So this has been going on for 25 years. And nothing happens, and nothing continues to happen. I think what we've got at the moment, you can see obviously the Epstein thing has opened up a lot of things. We've got X, and that's been really important, as Rupert said yesterday in Parliament, and he got booed and hissed. But it's not just Rupert; it's millions of people are disgusted by it, and I'm sure they're disgusted worldwide with it. As are we disgusted with the Epstein thing, and there are really strong parallels between this thing. I mean, what the Pakistanis were doing is more encompassed in their ideology and their religion about having non-Muslim sex slaves, but what Epstein was doing with his groups of people and women dying and children babies being born and all sorts of other horrendous things. And I don't think we really understand the full extent of it, but there are certainly deaths involved in the Epstein thing. They've got great parallels. And there were very few Muslims in the Epstein thing, though, because they didn't need to do that because they could just do it in Rotherham or in Britain. That was their island to be able to do this stuff.
The inquiry from Rupert Lowe, what about the support from other parties?
Well, with the exception of obviously small right-wing parties, there's no support whatsoever, no help whatsoever, not even from Reform. I mean, Reform chucked out Rupert Lowe because he was saying things about grooming gangs and Tommy Robinson, and Zia Youssef didn't like it. So our next supposed redemptive parliament doesn't want to cover it either. I mean, they'll make sort of generalised comments, but they won't support doing it. And as you know from having Robin Tilbrook on, he's done one private prosecution, and let's call them rapists, not groomers, rapists. Groom is just the euphemism. I think the next stage from Rupert is to do lots more private prosecution. And the way you get light on this stuff is start naming names. Name civil servants, name police officers, name lawyers. So, there has been some progress, small amount of progress on this, but it's just really at the beginning stage again. And I just don't see while we are continually, and we found out that illegals are involved in this, people who literally just arrived are being co-opted to do this. And we see as well, we've got a massively increasing rape in the country. So, and unfortunately, this will mean that women will have to change their behavior. I mean, I've just been in Australia, and it's really different. Whatever people say about immigration in Australia, I did not feel it was the same. It may be the same in percentage terms, but you've got different people. And, I didn't feel the same type of, maybe I didn't go to really bad areas, but I arrive at Sydney Airport and I arrive at Heathrow, and they have a very, very different feel.
I was just wondering, I was just thinking as you were talking, and about Robin too. Robin has, at least got a couple of muskets behind him. We've got to put powder in those muskets to fire it so he can protect himself. There must be a lot of flack. Do you ever feel in danger yourself? Because, I mean, you take in umbrage to halal, which is, and the cruelty that's associated with that, the cover-ups. We have the grooming gang inquiries. We have your activity. Does your house have like barbed wire, machine guns, sandbags out at the front? I'm just wondering because you must at times feel in danger because if it's implicating the elite, those that run the country, they're not going to be very happy with you at all. And the same thing with Robin. They're going to be very, very unhappy. And if you talk about all the terrible atrocities that happened to, burning of houses and tongues being nailed and that sort of stuff, the same could happen to you and Robin.
Well, and Rupert, I think he's going to be more of a target because he's much bigger.
He would have a security detail, and that's one probably advantage that he would have over you.
Well, the thing is, I don't read the comments. So if you don't read all the comments on Twitter, then you don't know. So you just assume. But
it's not them. It's not them, though. Sorry for butting in. Not them. It's the ones that you are exposing.
Yes, but I mean, Robin and I are smaller fish than somebody like Rupert Lowe. I
Mm.
still think if we were targeted, we would be targeted by Muslims, and we wouldn't be not so much MI5 or MI6 or an establishment. I
Mm.
mean, you remember Jill Dando? I don't know if you remember her. She was a BBC reporter who was about to expose paedophilia in the BBC, and she was shot on her doorstep, murdered on her doorstep. And the killer was never found. And it's in, Twitter today that it is possible that that was MI5 or MI6 who wanted to stop the type of Epstein stuff that was going on in the BBC. And so that was why she was murdered. I don't feel that I'm going to be murdered. No. Certainly if you put yourself in provocative situations, there is a real difference, of course, because you've got this massive divide between what I would call the nice countryside south and the northern cities. And it's in the northern cities where people have no other place, where they are in terrace houses, that they are being very intimidated by walking down the street or walking to school or anything else.
Has the government done anything about the inquiry? I mean, I would imagine you've presented this to the government. Anything happen, or just
they've ignored it.
We'll call you.
They've said, of course, that they were going to have an inquiry. Every time this comes up, the government says they're going to have an inquiry, and then they start putting so many restrictions on the survivors and the witnesses, and the person they usually appoint as a chair is either like some sort of left-wing Fabian communist, or they start implicating, let's do it generally for white men and Pakistani men. And all these sort of comments about white men have great women and white men have, yes, sure, they do. But it's the proportions, it's the numbers, the extent of it. And it's the cousin, uncle, brother, your friend who's just arrived on a boat, and everybody else, so that you get these 600 numbers. And it's so this big club, big ethnically controlled club by cousin marriage.
Tell me about some of the revelations that came out of the inquiry from Rupert.
Well, it depends what you know already. Obviously, I read probably 10, 15 years ago, Just a Child, and there's another book called Easy Meat, if anybody is interested in reading about this. So, I've been aware of these revelations, and they are, drugging, a girl going to a kebab shop, getting taken upstairs, drugged, raped, moved somewhere else, raped again by multiple people, friends all invited over, um, chucked out on the street, picked up by a taxi driver who then rapes her again. We've heard these stories time and time again, where fathers have tried to protect girls and get them back, and then the father gets arrested and the girl gets handed back. And so you've got young girls, they're plied with drugs, alcohol, money, and they effectively become encapsulated into this underground, this world, this gang world, and it's very difficult for anybody to get them out of it, and very difficult to escape. And many of them become pregnant, and so it goes on. And people who have, especially the fathers of these young girls, have had terrible consequences when they've tried to intervene.
What about the complicity of law enforcement? We're talking about, the courts, the coppers. How will this not only be exposed? I mean, the names of all those involved, and how do we fix the reputation of law enforcement? Because at the moment, it's taken a beating, and rightly so. And if they don't get back that respect and for the uniform and for the law enforcement itself, you're going to have a pretty unhappy and probably out of control in places country. How do we fix it?
I don't think we're going to fix it under this government. I mean, unfortunately, there's only two ways to fix it, which is that one is you have a radical change of government, and you have a right-wing government who starts to enforce law and order very seriously, maybe fires hundreds of corrupt policemen or left-wing policemen who won't enforce the law, or you start to have a civil war, and you have a Lebanization of the country, and it's not clear how things are working out, because people don't believe that they can get anywhere with the ballot box, because they still have the civil service and all these institutions and the judiciary stuck in place. That means that whoever you vote for, there's no difference.
Let's look at a future government under Nigel Farage. And you mentioned too that he was trying to appeal to, say, the Muslim community. You have been associated with politics since Adam was a boy. Can you tell me, do we have, because everyone's saying that Nigel, will be the next Prime Minister. I don't know. Does he deserve to be Prime Minister? Will he be able to cut the cake, as we say? Or will he just follow down the path of establishment and what has been will be?
Nigel is not Donald Trump. Nigel is something completely different, and he's very good. And I mean, I worked with Nigel, and I was taken in by Nigel, and so have many people. And the voters like Nigel. He's this cheeky chappy, and he's down at the pub. Unfortunately, I think he's down at the pub too much, and he's also getting old, and his health is not necessarily very good, and he's really interested in power and money at all costs. And we will see, but I'm not very optimistic about it. I don't see that reform is now what we need. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm a big Rupert Lowe supporter, and I would and so are many other people. He doesn't have a party at the moment, but we've got these terrible splits on the right. You could argue you've got terrible splits on the left. We've basically got a society in fractures. I mean, you've got the Green Party and Labour Party and Liberal Democrats on the left, and then on the right you've got the Conservative Party and Reform, and at the moment Advance, but maybe another Rupert Lowe party. So the country is very much like America. It's split 50-50, and both sides are becoming more radical, and they can't seem to resolve the problems. So what I do see is that we're just all going to get poorer, a lot poorer, because societies can't function under high taxation, really high taxation, and crime, and wasted resources all the time. They just sort of disintegrate slowly. So you've got the slow disintegration or the quicker one. So I'm not very optimistic at the moment. I mean, I'd be more optimistic, to be honest, still about Australia, even though you've got all your issues as well with free speech and the current government. I just see that Australia has got a vibrance that Britain doesn't have.
And we play better cricket too, by the way. Just thought I'd throw that part in. Although I do, if Stokes wants to become an Aussie, he's welcome. He's a very good player. Actually, we're just going to just take a slight turn here. We have 3 minutes left. What were your impressions of Australia?
Well, I'm very positive about people in East Asia. I've seen the massive transformation of Singapore from basically a dirt-ridden, country where the sailors could smell it, to having a GDP twice the UK, so very low tax rates. And so, UK was twice Singapore's, and now Singapore is twice the UK. I see the absolute extraordinary growth rates going on in Vietnam. The work ethic in Vietnam is off the scale. And to some extent, that your immigrants have not been the same sort of immigrants as ours. You have got, Pakistani and Islamic problems in places, but the proportions are lower, and you have imported people who, to a large extent, have wanted to work very hard and are working very hard. So obviously you've got the sun. It's much cleaner than Britain. There's no question about it. The buses run properly in Sydney. I don't know about other cities, but it's still a pretty nice environment in Australia. Whereas in Britain, a lot of Britain is not nice at all. It's litter strewn. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous for women. It's very dangerous if you've got a phone. I'll just give you an example. We were at a bus stop, and there was a mobile phone charger on the bus stop where you could lay your phone. And one of my daughters, who lived in London, said, "Well, you wouldn't be able to do that in London because your phone would just be snatched." So it wasn't just, and I would also argue that the whole bus stop would have been smashed to pieces in London. So that bus stop gives you an idea about how some of the things are working in Australia versus London, for example.
Yeah, it's funny. We do have, I have to say, Australia is a magnificent country. Unfortunately, we have a very bad government. Then we have the erasure of the top of the Great Dividing Range with plonking windmills there. We have all these resources, coal, uranium, stuff like that, which we ship overseas and basically don't want to use it ourselves. We have high cost of living, mortgages have gone up, houses are going up. Where we live in our area, it went up 4 times what it was worth during COVID or just before COVID, and that's incredible. So we do have problems, but we look at the UK. And and by the way, I love the UK. I have to say it's a magnificent country. But you do have problems. And I think it's because you're a lot smaller than we are and you are crammed in. And you got 3 times the population we have, or almost 4 times, and crammed into a very small island. And I think that's part of the problem. But the most alarming thing about your country is how putrid your governments are, your politicians are. And they're no different from the pigs in the swill in other countries. And that disappoints me. And I think that's the part, and that's what we're heading down that way too, by the way. So we're not exempt. And I think it's the way of the world. Catherine, I don't know how we're going to take it back. I think Rupert Lowe, what I've read about Rupert Lowe, and I think he's got some gonads, and good on him. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. We just got to keep our fingers crossed. Just quickly, what do you think? What's going to happen now with the inquiry? Where does it go to now?
I think it will go to private prosecutions next. So there will be individuals and to actually, we can't rely on the state to do anything. So people will have to privately prosecute individual rapists themselves.
I can see Robin very busy. You should borrow one of his muskets. Don't know if it works, but they look really good. Or nick one of his bottles of plonky he has hidden. That's much more effective. Catherine Blakelock, thank you so much. If somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Blakelock, lowercase BLAIKLOCK, capital B, capital P for the Brexit Party. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's it for our gig for the day. This has been we had the protagonist, which Basil Valentine came back, which I thought was simply wonderful. Had some great guests on all day talking about things that matter not only to the UK but to Australia and the rest of the world. Have a good one. I'll catch you tomorrow. This is The World Today.